Welcome and good morning to this AM edition, the first ever Edition and Switching podcast. This is Eddie here with Nick. It is February 9th at 10:40 a.m. Nick drove out from Queens to get this bad boy done. We wanted to get a little Super Bowl recap and the Knicks firing Derek Fisher, so a lot to get into today. Obviously, first we'll start with the big game, Super Bowl 50, and we'll tackle that. But first, Nick, what's going on?
Nothing. My wish came true, so that's good. That something happened in sports that was outrageous enough for us to talk about. The Knicks fired Fisher, so that was good. I don't know. I had a good Super Bowl. Sunday was solid. You know, me and the old man, Peyton Manning, had a few things in common, mostly drinking beers. But, other than that, that's it, man. I'm good. We have a quick turnaround this week.
Yeah, this is the quickest, the smallest gap between podcasts. I believe the last
Just a
one
couple
was
days, Saturday.
The 6th. Today's the 9th. But, sports called for it to happen. We had the Super Bowl recap, like I said. The Knicks, the breaking news yesterday, firing Derek Fisher. So they gave us no choice because if we wait a couple of days, it gets kind of stale. We want to be right in the thick of things, talking about the Cam Newton nonsense. We want to talk about Peyton's future. We want to talk about the Knicks' potential replacement. So waiting too long would have been bad. But yeah, like you, I had a pretty good Super Bowl. Ate a lot.
Tell me about your Super Bowl.
Ate a lot, drank a lot. Actually, ate too much and drank too much. The game itself was pretty boring, but when you have a good crowd, it makes it better. You enjoy it more with your friends and family, but the game itself was not very entertaining. I think I mentioned one of the last podcasts. I mean, this game, the score was relatively close, but the quality of play was not great. I guess it's better to see a close scoring game than a blowout by 3+ touchdowns, because a lot of Super Bowls have been like that.
Well, you got lucky, though, because one of your best friends is a Panthers fan,
right,
so he kind of had
I did have a real Panthers fan in the house.
Besides Panthers fans, he had a little bit of money riding on the game. So
a little action riding.
So that always makes things more exciting. In my household,
surprisingly, I was the only one not to really have action on the
really?
game. Most people in the house did, and we did have a real life Panthers fan. There are a lot. Not from Carolina. His story though is pretty funny. It was the year they went 1-15, and he didn't have a favorite NFL team. So what he did was pick the worst team in the NFL and said it's only going to get better from here. So
that was the year before they drafted Newton, right?
Yeah, way before. This is way before, way earlier. Because Eric's Russian. His parents aren't from the country, so they don't care about the NFL. There's no
Football
NFL
to them is played with actual feet.
Yeah, exactly. So he's definitely a true Panthers fan. I'll give him that, and it's definitely a terrible feeling to see your team lose and know that your pockets now have holes in them. That's just that's miserable.
Well, in my household, we don't bet. Big Walt the cop is not really the betting type, but he's more of like the sleeping type. So my dad caught a nice snooze midway through that game, like beginning of the third quarter to like midway through the fourth. My dad was just out cold. Well,
a nap would have been good for me for the amount that I consumed.
I wish I would have slept through halftime though, because that was just. I feel like I missed like an LSD trip.
The
I really
show
did.
They said it had a theme. I didn't really grasp it. I didn't understand what they were going for. I don't understand. We didn't talk about this last podcast, but I don't understand why they had Bruno Mars and Beyonce, who just did it. I feel like a year ago. 2 years ago in New York, Bruno Mars was there with the Chili Peppers. And then Beyonce, I'm not sure how recent she was, but she was recent. Coldplay never has before. But you're in San Francisco. You could use the San Francisco bands. There's Metallica, and there's the Grateful Dead, and there's Santana. And
even Santana did a little bit, but he could have had a bigger impact, sure.
Even Train, which is more mainstream. There's plenty of bands you could have done like a whole San Fran medley, and they didn't want to get into that. Metallica did have the free concert the night before, I think near like Candlestick Park, the parking lot near that.
I was just so confused.
The
I was so
halftime was just very. I mean, it's not my cup of tea, but I could be okay with certain acts that are entertaining. At least Katy Perry last year, I thought was pretty fun for the most part.
That's what I was saying. Last part, I said we need her tiger, and then they showed the tiger. I got a little bit of excitement, but it
wasn't.
Didn't happen.
But people love Beyonce, and Bruno Mars literally offends no one on the planet, so he's a very safe play, very easy guy to have there. Coldplay, everyone knows a few songs by them. The ones they always hear on the radio. So they thought it would mesh well. I'm not one that agree with that.
It made no sense to me. And then so they started doing like this psychedelic thing, and I just, like I said, I felt like I was missing an acid trip.
Yeah.
And then Beyonce comes out in like the Black Panther outfits, and I was just so totally confused at everything that went on. And then they were doing like like a three-way combo of Bruno Mars, like "Don't Believe Me, Just Watch." I literally sat there. I was like, I must have looked like a drool monkey because I didn't get any of it.
Yeah, it was not great. The best performance of the day was probably Lady Gaga doing the anthem.
She was excellent,
and she got the under. So a lot of people won money on that.
Your dad's friend Stephanie was excellent.
Good friend Stephanie, yes. So yeah, the under was the under on the anthem. We had some people here with money on that. She had a great performance, probably better than the halftime show. The game itself, like I said before, was underwhelming in terms of the quality. The best drive the Broncos had was their first drive of the game, and then after that, it was terrible. They didn't convert a third down since the first drive. Peyton in the first drive again looked really good. He looked like, wow, he maybe could do this. Maybe his arm, the 2 weeks rest might have helped him. But after that, it was
all downhill.
Same old Peyton, and I felt the whole entire game. I really did feel this way, that it was just a matter of time until Cam was back to being Cam. And he would have done his typical thing. He would have ran when they rushed him, and he would have hit the open guy, throwing off his back foot, throwing a dart, 30 yards down the field, and it never happened. It never happened the whole game. And the one thing we both said was the defense of the Broncos, if they win this game, you elevate them to a Mount Rushmore of defenses in the NFL history, or at least close to that. And that was the one shot they had to win, and it played out that way. Like, we were dead wrong. Our predictions
literally
were dead wrong.
1,000,000% wrong.
Well, you were 37-13. I was 37-16. I said with my head, there's no way the Panthers could lose this game. My heart, I wanted Peyton to win this game and ride off into the sunset. We'll get to that, whether he will or not, shortly. But in terms of the game itself and the score and the outcome, I thought this was the Panthers game to win. And I think it's one of those, they say football any given Sunday, and you have, I'm losing my voice right now. They don't want me to talk about the Panthers. They don't want you to talk about the Panthers. All right.
So go ahead.
No, but they say any given Sunday, and it's one of those
So
games where if the Broncos play the Panthers, 10 times, that might have been the one time the Broncos win the game, and the 9 others, or the Panthers win that game by multiple scores. And I think that's the saying, any given Sunday. We got the one Sunday where the Broncos, everything was gelling right, especially on the defensive side, and they won that game.
You know what, though? The Panthers were just so thoroughly outplayed. And it was, what really, really shook me in the beginning, in the beginning of the game, and then I kind of lulled in the middle, and then again at the end, was that a tremendous amount of what I think was arrogance on the Panthers' part. You know exactly. Phone. I swear to God, this
I hit
phone
it last week in the bathroom, and my mom came during Super Bowl Sunday. Was like, "Where's our phone?" I'm like, "Oh, it's in our bathroom, hidden under a bunch of towels," because I could not figure out how to turn the ringer off.
But it's like it only comes on. It only comes on when we podcast. Anyway, it's a tremendous amount of arrogance on the Panthers' part. Because you thought that you were gonna go into that building against the best defense in the league and do the same thing you've been doing all year long. Which, granted, yeah, sure, it's worked all year long. But really, you had nothing for their blitzes. You had nothing for their outside rushers. And I just thought, maybe they would have some sort of game plan to combat this.
That's a good point, and I can see where you're coming from, but the one reason why I might disagree with that is because they didn't really play a close game. And yes, they did lose to the Falcons, but I could blame that more on the Panthers not executing than the Falcons actually beating them.
Sure.
So I feel like this game was something where they said, why change what's working? Why reinvent the wheel? We're the Panthers. We're the best offense in the league. We scored the most points in the league. Why can't we just keep doing what we're doing, which is, run when you can. If they rush Cam, he'll run, and if not, he'll make the plays to the mediocre wide receivers and then Greg Olsen. That's what the game plan always is, and it's let Cam take over, essentially. And they didn't feel the need to change that dynamic. Like I was talking before we started the show, Jonathan Stewart, the past, I think, 11 or 12 games, has rushed the ball for over 18 times. So they're a run-heavy team. They didn't get to do that in this game, especially because you're down. You're not going to be able to do that.
This is what I'm saying. This is arrogance. This is like, we're going to do what we do every time.
That it always worked for them. It always worked. So why change what works?
But this is a different animal. This is a different defense. This is a different game. This is something where you saw what the Broncos could do to other teams, make really great offenses look mediocre.
Right. But let me ask you this: so if you're the Panthers and you're the coach of the Panthers, or you're Cam Newton of the Panthers, and everything has worked for you on offense this whole entire year, just because you're playing the Broncos now, you're going to say, well, let me change what we do because of the Broncos. Well, it could be the other way around. The Broncos could be thinking, well, we never played an offense like this. Let's change what we do for the Panthers. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, why change what you're doing just because of the new defense? You should be confident in your own offense.
I think
to continue
that
doing what you've been doing.
I understand that too, but here's the kind of the combat to that is you don't have any wrinkle of newness in your offense at all. Like, where is just one thing that we haven't seen before? One rollout or one design run for Cam or one route that we have not seen before. There was nothing new, and I get it. And I get it that it literally has worked all year. Obviously, they're the number one offense, and you have a bunch of great points. But, like, this is the Super Bowl. This is where you kind of have to pull out all of the stops to get it done. And if you don't have any sort of wrinkle in your offense, then shame on you.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, especially with the 2 weeks of prep. You get 2
weeks of prep.
There's
you got
plenty of film
to
time,
put
plenty of time to
something
install
in
something.
your
Yeah,
I don't know.
But it's one of those things where if you did it something for X amount of weeks, and in this case, it's 17, 18 weeks plus more.
Right.
So why change what works? And I get that. And why invent something new the week of the big game when everything has worked for you? Like, why not be consistent? I understand where you're coming from to change something, especially when you're playing the monster that was the Denver Broncos defense, who, the MVP of the game was Von Miller, but I think the real, dark horse MVP, and he can't win it, was Wade Phillips.
Yeah.
And the architect of that defense. And just, everyone on every level, there was somebody on every level of that defense who made great plays. Even people got into Aqib Talib's face. He had a pretty good game. Chris Harris had a great game. They shut down, not the receivers were very, they weren't hard to match up against anyway because they are who they are. Nothing against them, but Ted Ginn and company and Philly Brown and Jericho Cotchery, they're not world beaters here. And to have them basically out of the game was a great job by their part. The defensive line, Derek Wolfe, stopping the run, getting there early. Jonathan Stewart didn't have anything going from that whole game. And then obviously with the linebackers, come on, DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. Every other play was either one of them in the backfield. Von Miller ended up winning the MVP. The early from that first sack that Cam fumbled and they scored the touchdown on it, you knew that this game had a different vibe to it. And Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware shows you, and I said this during the game, that if I'm a GM in the NFL or an owner or a coach or whatever, I'm drafting outside linebacker after outside linebacker in every single draft until I find two guys who could do what they do. And just that to me seems like to be the number one most important position in the NFL. And to counter that means the left and right tackle are probably the next most important positions in the NFL. And Michael Orr had a great season this year, but it wasn't even. And he I was more on DeMarcus Ware's side. And Von Miller rushes from the right side. If you are the quarterback, he comes from your right side. That's why obviously Orr is the blind side left tackle. But it shows you how important having a great pass rush is without even blitzing.
It was to the point where, like I said, if Von Miller or DeMarcus Ware were in the backfield any earlier, they would have taken the damn snap. Yeah. They would have taken the snap from the center. This guy, Von Miller, maybe there was a little extra fuel there because him and Cam were in the same draft.
Yeah,
1-2,
like 2011.
He could have been a Panther.
Which, by the way, that draft, I don't know if you had a chance to look back at it.
Outstanding.
I did.
Outstanding.
Phenomenal draft.
Outstanding.
Phenomenal draft.
And, maybe there's a little extra fuel for the one team that didn't think I was good enough to go number one or decided to go in a different direction. Whatever it may be.
It's
whatever.
Just the quarterback always wins out.
But that was excellent. And DeMarcus Ware, you know what? He's another one. He's another one like Peyton Manning. Good for the old man. He deserved it. He deserved it after years in Dallas. He goes and kind of gets to a winning organization.
Yeah.
That can get it done, and I was happy to see him get a Super Bowl ring as well.
Yeah,
and he played his ass off.
Yeah,
He's a good
guy. He's a funny guy. Wade Phillips. They had him dancing after the game in the club with the players, and then back to DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller. You had DeMarcus Ware, who the guy's just the quintessential pro, and I'm a Giants fan, and it's hard for me to root for a Cowboy. But now that DeMarcus Ware comes to the Denver Broncos, and I see what kind of person he is, what kind of player he is, and how hard he worked, and he gave the speech just the night before. It was Peyton Manning, and it was DeMarcus Ware giving the Saturday night speech, and they said both were brought to tears, and it was a very emotional time for that whole team. And listen, the guy wanted to win, and then you have Von Miller on the other side, who had his ups and downs in his career. Drafted number 2 out of Texas A&M, and then he had the whole drug suspension, and he tore his ACL, so he missed Super Bowl 48 in New York. And now he redeems himself and comes back to being a guy who's a team player and being a more than a team player, he's showing that he could be one of the best players in the NFL. And you could say J.J. Watt, who's the defensive MVP of this season, has won a couple already, and obviously he might be the most important player on the other side of the football. But Von Miller doing what he did kind of shows you, yes, the quarterback is the most important position on the field. You're the field general, and they are they're the straw that stirs a drink on your team, because if you don't have a really good quarterback, it's hard for you to win a Super Bowl. Look at the past Super Bowl winners. They're all Brady. They're all Mannings. They're all Roethlisberger. And you have Rodgers, Flacco, and Russell Wilson. They're the upper echelon of quarterbacks, really, in the NFL. But seeing what Von Miller did and what DeMarcus Ware did, it shows that even the quarterback, who is the most important position on the field, could be disrupted by those two positions. So in my mind, I kind of change of what is the most important, aspect of a team. And a pass rush, if it stopped Tom Brady, 2 weeks ago, and it stopped Cam Newton, 2 days ago,
it can stop anybody.
It can really stop anybody. So, I mean, if I'm a GM now, or I'm an owner, not that they already didn't look at them, because pass rushers did go high in drafts, and they were coveted in free agency, but I think you're putting an extra premium on that position right now, because it literally changes the outcome of a game more than a quarterback could, because it takes away the importance of that position.
I'm going to take your point a little bit further and say that Von Miller is beginning to ascend himself to a place where, we've seen great defenses before, right? And they've had Mike Singletary's, they've had Brian Urlachers, they've had Ray Lewis's, they've had John Lynch, Rondé Barber, Warren Sapp. Are we finally seeing Von Miller as the key cog to an all-time great defense going forward? And I think that he's not there yet, because that's why I wouldn't put this Broncos team as an all-time great. Mm-hmm. But if they continue to play this way, and Von Miller continues to play in this manner, he's clearly ascending himself as the best player on the best defense. And that's a really, really nice thing to have on your resume. That's a great distinction to have.
And all those positions you just brought up with the cornerback or the middle linebacker, and it's great having a shutdown corner. It's great having a linebacker who's sideline to sideline, but none impacted the game the way a pass rusher did, an outside linebacker or a defensive end did, whether hand down or just in a 2-point stance.
Sure, and I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that the game is changing, or has changed already, to the point where Von Miller's in a unique position, because we're at a point where he is needed so much more. The game is changing, and we see more offenses go to the 3 wide receiver set, the shotgun set, and they're pass heavy with multiple weapons, and even the tight end is involved in the pass game now. So it's to a point where you need a guy who could get into the backfield 1 second, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds in. And so it's not the middle linebacker or the strong safety or a cornerback or one cornerback. It's a guy who can literally just run as fast as he can and make moves straight, get to the quarterback.
Yeah, and I don't get why teams don't build it that way, because we've seen lockdown cornerbacks, guys like Darrelle Revis and the Jets, though they didn't win the whole thing. And a cornerback eventually gets beat. We've seen Norman get beat. We've seen Sherman get beat. We've seen Revis get beat. We've seen guys before them get beat. Champ Bailey, what have you. Cornerbacks get beat. Safeties really don't factor into, having a nice safety is great. It's good for your team. But Earl Thomas and other guys of that ilk aren't really game changers. That's the reason why safeties aren't valued as much in drafts as other positions are. If you're going to draft interior linemen, that's great. But, they're not changing the game. And Ndamukong Suh is not changing the game the same way Von Miller was. Middle linebacker, same thing. Luke Kuechly didn't have nearly the amount of the impact that Von Miller or DeMarcus Ware have. The most important position on the defense, without question now, I could say without question,
is a pass rusher.
Is the pass rusher, the defensive end, outside linebacker, hybrid, what have you. That is the most important position on the field. And right now I think it's up there with quarterback, because if you have a great quarterback, it's still going to be overshadowed by how good the linebackers play, because his performance is directly related to how many times they get to you, and how many times they pressure you, how many times they hit you after a throw. It's all changing your mental aspect. It's changing your physical aspect, because it hurts. FYI, getting hit by a 6'5", 250-pound man, that hurts.
It does?
I think so. So that changes your whole your whole I guess vibes or you bring on the offense to the game, because you're not going to play the same way you would in a game you don't get touched.
And to add to that, they're too quick for a tackle or a guard, and they're too strong for a running back or a fullback. And so they're in another, once again, unique position because they can kind of do it all. Von Miller can do it all. We saw it against Brady, too.
Yes.
With the interception as well.
Brady had happy feet. Brady didn't play his game. Cam Newton, who's a dual threat, could not play his game because of the outside linebackers, which also, like I said before, that makes the position of left tackle and right tackle even more important. If I'm a GM, it's like those are the three positions I'm looking at. I'm looking at tackle, linebacker, defensive end, whatever your defense scheme is, and then quarterback after that, because your quarterback could be the best in the world, like we just saw the past 2 games the Broncos played against, 2 of the best quarterbacks in the world, and they look like absolute trash because of DeMarcus Ware and because of Von Miller. So Von Miller winning that MVP after his up and down career, congratulations to you, man. You deserve that.
He's about to get
great
paid.
Redemption story. Yeah, I mean
he's about to get
from
paid.
His post game. He did an interview with Trey Wingo, I think, before he got on the podium, and he sounded like that he wanted to stay with the Broncos because the first thing he said was, Mr. Elway is great, one of the best general managers in the league. He'll figure things out. My agents will figure things out. I trust him wholeheartedly. So I think that he's looking to stay in Denver, and I don't blame him. I mean, that team still has a great core, and you're going to have a guy, Brock, who will step in and be, I think, a very good quarterback. And let's face it, Brock Osweiler deserves a lot of praise because he, if a guy came in his shoes when Peyton went down, and he lost a bunch of those games and did not have a winning record,
then it justifies
you don't know where
Peyton
they are.
Back.
Yeah, and you don't know where they'd be right now.
But for him to win all those games as well and then kind of take the backseat again when he even struggled just a tiny little bit. Yeah. Gary Kubiak called Mariano Rivera, and Peyton came in and closed the deal and won a Super Bowl. So he showed a lot of grace.
Did he go 4-2?
I don't know exactly.
I think he only had 2 losses, but let's just say that he, they were the number 1 seed because he came in and he performed well. If he didn't, then this season is a totally different outcome for the Denver Broncos.
He righted the ship, or he kind of just kept it going for that matter.
So they have their guy. They have their next guy.
Easily.
It's just, that's why I think that Von Miller will stay, because they have a great defensive core. I mean, DeMarcus Ware's not going anywhere yet. I don't think he's going to retire. And you still have guys like Wolf, and I said Talib, and Chris Harris, Trevathan, and Bernard Marshall, all those linebackers. It's a great core. You have Wade Phillips, who's a defensive mastermind. He stopped the MVP. He stopped Tom Brady. So there's no reason to leave. He'll get paid, but hopefully he'll stay there because I think they have a good thing going for them. Do you want to get into the whole Brady? I mean, the Peyton aspect. Now we're talking about Brock. What do you think that is his next step? Do you think this is it for Peyton Manning? We see him go out on top.
Look, I think that for his sake and for his health,
he better.
He better. He better.
He wasn't very good at all.
For his sake and his health.
He was not very good.
I've heard some really disturbing stories about Peyton Manning, about not being able to tie his own shoes and not being able to put his pads on.
He wears a glove on his throwing hand because he has no feeling in his fingertips.
That's worrisome. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really worrisome. Look, you've done it now. You're at this point now where you can take a look at your career and say, okay, I'm 2-2 in the Super Bowl. I won for 2 different teams. I have 5 MVPs. I have the most passing yards ever. I have the most touchdowns
ever stat in the book.
I have the most touchdowns. I've done it. I've had a long career. I came back from my neck injury and kind of proved everybody wrong. I'm done. What more do I have to give to the game of football? Nothing.
He can't stay. And to his credit, he knew that he came back as a glorified game manager. He knew that he cannot make the throws he could have made 5, 7, 10 years ago. He's
for
not
a guy who watches as much film as he watches, you got to know that. Come on.
Yeah, no, I say that, but I'm saying that he did not force throws he couldn't make, and he was smart about things, and he was the game manager of all game managers this year, and that's why they won, because he tried to stop making his mistakes. Look what he did. The end of last year and some parts of this year where he was still trying to make those throws and he was throwing interception after interception. You can't be a turnover machine if you're a game manager. Your job is to literally make sure that you do nothing wrong. You have to, hand the ball off when you have to hand the ball off and make the short, easy throw when you can. And he took that role and he did it. He's not going to have the arm like Brock Osweiler did and make those, 60-yard bombs. He had trouble hitting, like I said, the 15-yard out. He was overthrowing guys. He's putting everything into the throw, and it's not going where he wants to go. So after seeing how he played in the past couple of games and the Super Bowl, there's just no part of me that says that he could be a quarterback on a team that is not nearly as talented as the Broncos were. What I mean by that is, say, the
LA.
Rams.
Say
The Rams,
LA,
yeah, exactly. The Rams move from St. Louis to L.A., and they say, Peyton, come here for $25 million a year. Now, the Rams do not have the talent level. I mean, they're not even in the same universe right now as what the Broncos have on offense or defense. And let's be honest, the Broncos' defense is what got them there. They, like I said, I still think they're one of the best defenses ever, and that's the reason why they won this game. It's purely because of them.
But you know what?
But on the offensive side of the ball, they
Right.
still have a couple guys. They still have Demaryius Thomas. They still traded for Vernon Davis, and they have Owen Daniels. They still have Emmanuel Sanders, who is Peyton's guy. You know, they have C.J. Anderson and Ronnie Hillman. They have players. The Rams do have Gurley. Outside of that, it's not so great. The defensive line, pretty good. It's not the level of the Broncos. So Peyton going to L.A. would be a disaster. I don't think that, what happened this year was the Broncos offered him, I think, $9 million. He said no. Then they said $12 million. He said no. And then they gave him 15 with bonuses to making if he made the playoffs or the Super Bowl. And then it was, and then if they won the Super Bowl, it was actually like a $2 or $3 million each bonus along the way. And he said yes to that. The Broncos don't want anything to do with him either. So it's going to be a case where the Broncos are saying, thanks for your services. We see how you play. We won a championship with you. We're going to move forward with our guy Brock because he proved that he could take over the reins, and we're going to use the core we have left and keep going forward. Because right now, Peyton would be a negative to this team because you're not going to be able to do what you want to do. The one big storyline people always talked about also was Gary Kubiak's offense. Peyton refused to run his offense. Gary Kubiak is a very run-heavy oriented coach. Peyton says, I'm good. I'm going to stay in the pistol and the shotgun and do what I want to do. That's great if you were Peyton 10 years ago. Peyton now can't do what Peyton 10 years ago did, so it makes absolutely no sense to keep Peyton Manning. And I'm not trying to bash Peyton. It sounds like a very negative slant right now, but what I'm saying is the guy's 40 years old and can't make a 15-yard out. He won the Super Bowl all because of the defense. So it's time to say, I won Super Bowl 50. My legacy is going to be as good as it can possibly get now with 2 rings. I went to Super Bowls with 4 different coaches. I won with 2 different teams. It's time to hang them up. There's just no other way around it.
There isn't any way around it. And you know what's scary, too, is how good the Broncos could be with Osweiler, with a rocket ship for a right arm. If he continues to develop and show progress, defense, weapons, and a guy who could actually chuck the rock, this team could be really, really good, to your point. But yes, I think it's time for Peyton. I think he realizes it's time as well. I think he's just trying to soak this one in before he really pulls the trigger on any sort of retirement stuff.
Yes,
just kind
100%.
of really try and soak this one in, enjoy your win, and enjoy your career and what you've done for the game of football, for the Denver Broncos, and for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yes.
And then wrap it up.
That's the great. I didn't make that point, and you just reminded me that I think he knows he wants to retire. I think that's why Eli hinted at it. I think Archie hinted at it. That's why he said what he did to Bill Belichick about the last rodeo. But I think, it was a classy move on his part, because if he announces his retirement during Super Bowl, what happens?
That's the entirety of the media coverage.
Yep.
That's the entirety of everything, and it takes entirely
Bingo.
away from your team and your defense and your success and this and that.
Exactly.
And
That's the other point, too.
Sure.
And does he, the way he played in that game, did he deserve to make it about himself? Frankly, no, he didn't.
And he did,
It's about the
he
defense.
did not.
Yeah. So credit to him for not doing that, and I think that's the angle he was going for. That's why if you saw the prop bets, it was like minus 2,000 for him to say that he retired during the broadcast, which there was no way of him doing that. Peyton's not a meat first guy. He never really was. But to do that in a game, how would you feel if you were Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware or Danny Trevathan or Aqib Talib and you hear Peyton Manning go, I'm retiring, and all of a sudden everyone goes, the microphones shift from in front of your face to Peyton's podium, whatever. That's the story. It's not about
And Jim Nantz, if Jim Nantz would have gotten him to say, I'm retiring in that post-game little
CBS
interview,
would love it.
well, Jim Nantz would have probably melted out of excitement.
It's and they tried really hard, but he wasn't going to give it up. And
I think the
there was
Budweiser comment was the best response.
Yeah, and apparently
the best
he wasn't
response to the retirement questions was the Budweiser.
and he doesn't
response.
even have an endorsement with them because no active NFL player is allowed to have a beer sponsor. So maybe that's a hint that he's retiring soon. He's going to pull the old Brett Favre out and just do a bunch of commercials with Budweiser. But I don't think he was going to ever announce it then, and it makes sense not to because you weren't the reason you won this game. The reason you won this game is for the other 11 guys on the other side of the ball. So you could thank them and let them enjoy this and let them soak it up
for
because
as
they
many
deserve it.
times as people can thank you for what you did for them, and Austin Collie and Dallas Clark and
Anthony
Gonzalez. Oh my goodness! For all those times, those
Joseph
guys could
Adai,
thank
Edgerrin
Peyton.
James.
All those guys can thank Peyton for what he did. He can show a little gratitude towards his defense, and he did an excellent job of really deflecting it. And I watched an interview with him and SVP last night, late before I went to bed, and he was just totally gracious. And he's just a guy that you really want to model yourself around. I mean, what a guy!
The guy had
what a guy!
You know, we witnessed potentially the greatest quarterback ever. Seeing what he did, and you could say what you want about Brady with the rings, but watching Peyton week after week in the regular season and seeing all the stats that he put up, like he's the Will Chamberlain of the NBA or the Wayne Gretzky of the of the NFL. Sorry, every stat, every passing stat has his name on it. I mean, he's broken every record you possibly could. He just broke Brett Favre's win record. He has 200 wins on the dot.
200 wins. Think about that, man. Think about 200 wins. That's 10 wins a year for 20 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of wins in the NFL.
Wins.
That's just, it's really hard to wrap your mind around something like that. And not only is that a long career, but you have to stay healthy too.
Yes, that's the thing. He was until recently, and you mentioned a lot of guys before, like you said, Anthony Gonzalez and Austin Collie and Dallas Clark, and who knows what those guys are even doing without Peyton Manning. And you could say, he choked in the playoffs, but look at some of those defensive rosters. They're not
anymore, though.
Not very good. Not very good. This is the first team who really had a good defense. Those Colts, especially those Colts teams, man, those Colts defenses were not good.
For as much as you can say that, though, not anymore, because he's 2-2 in the Super Bowl.
Right. And
1-3 is a lot different than 2-2.
Sure.
A lot different.
Sure. Have a multi Super Bowl winning quarterback, it puts you in a different level with these the all-time greats, and just seeing how surgical he was during his career, and just the 2-minute drill stuff, and you just always knowing that you have a chance when you have 18 as your quarterback. And I guess not that this game was sad seeing him the way he was, because he still won and he still did what he had to do. That's why I gave him credit before for being the ultra game manager. But it's definitely time to hang it up, and I can't see him playing another year. And if he does, I have problems with, one, him being selfish, and two, the team just being a complete sellout and just wanting sales and jerseys and tickets, because there's no way you can convince me in terms of football, in terms of X and O, that having Peyton Manning as your quarterback in 2016, 2017 makes any sense. Any sense at all.
Agreed.
On the flip side, with our guy Cam Newton, the MVP, there was a lot of talk with the diving and the post-game press conference. And I know that we both share an issue with the diving, but I'm not sure about the press conference here, where I don't feel the same as everyone else for a couple of reasons, but I know you had a spiel on that before.
Yeah, you know what? Look, I think that when you don't lose with some sort of grace about yourself, I would begin to wonder about you long term. And, for all of the giving footballs to fans and to dancing around the field and for this and that, when you don't dive on the ball and you lose like that and walk out of your press conference, I wonder about you. And you said, straight up, I'll play the clip for you. You stop me on the field, and I'll stop dancing. And they did. They stopped you. They shut you up pretty good. So you know what? It's time for you to give credit where credit is frankly due. And I know that no one wants to lose. And he said, I'm on record as being a sore loser. I hate losing. You show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser. To an extent, I agree. But they did what you told people to do. You told everyone, stop me. I dare you. And they did. So you know what? Shut up is kind of it. Just take your blows as you may. You'll be back there.
Yeah, and dealing with the fumble quick, I mean, to make this short and sweet, you have to dive on that football. You're the quarterback of the team. You lost the fumble. It's the biggest game of your career. You have to dive on it. It's football. It's physical. I don't care if you're going to get dirty. I don't care if you're going to get hurt. I don't care if you thought your teammate had it. I don't care if you thought the Broncos had it. You dive, you put your nose in there, and you try to get the ball back for your team.
Ed, do you know what game that was?
Super Bowl 50, the most important of his career. You have to do it. You have to do it. There's no other way around it. With the press conference, I have a different mentality on it because... And I'm not saying he's not a sore loser. I'm not saying he wasn't babyish. People have said he's a great winner and he's a terrible loser. Like teammates and other coaches around him have said that about him. But and I try to put myself in his shoes, in his probably 6'5", 250-pound body, and his large shoes. After winning the MVP, the night before, after going 15-1 in the regular season, after putting a spanking on the Seahawks and the Cardinals, coming to this game versus the Broncos, a team with I'm looking at there's a major trade in the NHL we'll get to. Dion Phaneuf traded to the Ottawa Senators. We'll get to that in a minute. But back to this rant. So you lose the big game, the biggest of your career, after the whole season of you becoming the face of the NFL, you becoming the next best quarterback in the NFL, with Peyton probably leaving and Brady, up there in age, and you just blow this game completely. You don't look comfortable at all. The defense has their way with you, and you come out to the podium and you have the Broncos celebrating behind you, behind the back of your head, and you hearing them. And then you have reporters going, "Oh my God, Cam, how does it feel to lose this game? Well, please tell me, describe your emotions. You lose it." Like it's must be the most frustrating and nauseating experience of your life to have these idiot reporters asking you questions about how it feels to lose.
I'll agree with that.
I try to put myself in there in his shoes and saying, I just blew it. I just lost a game I was supposed to win because everybody told me I was supposed to win. You have Eddie Murphy in his podcast saying the line should be 13.5. The Broncos should be getting 13.5 points because this game is going to be a blowout. You had Eddie Murphy in his podcast saying the Broncos will lose this game 37 to 16 to your team that you're the quarterback of, because that's how good you've been this year, and your team is destined to be one of the best teams in NFL history, that up there with the Baltimore Ravens of 2000 and the 85 Bears and the Seahawks of 2013 and the undefeated Patriots team, even though they lost, and the Dolphins of 74, whatever. You're already being crowned, and you lose this game in the way you did, where you didn't have a shot. I don't care how close the score was, you didn't have a shot. So when you're on the podium and you sit there for your 3 minutes you're supposed to, and you say, I don't know what else there is to say, I lost the game, it stinks, yada, 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 and you get up and leave, I'm not entirely mad at you and saying, oh, it's because he's a showboat and this and that, because, again, all that hatred for him is fueled by race, and I'm still convinced by that, and it's still fueled by people hating him for dancing, and you could say, yeah, you can't dance when you win, you can't take a man when you lose, but what is he really supposed to do up there? Repeat his answer to the same question he'll be asked 100 times? What could you ask the loser of a team when that happens to you? There's not really many questions you could ask. What went wrong? How do you feel? Besides that, what's going to happen? I think the real problem, honestly, is the interviewing process. If the Broncos win or any of the Super Bowl, if the winners win, let it be about them winning, and let the Panthers or the losing team just go home. And then maybe the next day or whenever they travel back, have a media day for the losing team, a season kind of wrap up then, a day or two later, a week later, whatever. And then you could have time to sit on your emotions and, let things that were festering just kind of go away. And then you can come back and say, yeah, I didn't execute this. I screwed up this. I should have dove in that fumble. And then you don't have to worry about a guy whose reaction from the minute he loses, he literally just stepped off the field. He's probably still sweating, stolen his cleats. Some guys stolen their pads. And you're making him answer questions about losing the biggest game of his career. And who knows if he'll ever be back. And I'm not saying he won't, but you don't know that. So when you blow a season where you were destined to become one of the best teams ever, you had a great season for a quarterback, 45 touchdowns, you're the MVP of the league, and you blew a game to a guy who can't throw a 10-yard out, then that's a problem. And he understands that. He recognizes how big of a failure he was. So I'm not going to get in his case for being, very upset. His natural raw reaction from the minute he stepped off the field. I can't get on his case for that.
You know what, though? You're right. Interviewing process is not really great. I think that it could be done a lot better, obviously. I think there are a lot of people that are very incompetent, that ask questions that are pretty much just flat out stupid.
And they're doing their job, but, what can you ask?
Yeah,
you're not going to get a good response.
It's idiocy. It really is idiocy. You have to, because how many times can you reword a question to ask a guy how he feels, or how many times are you going to reword a question for him to tell you flat out, I sucked?
Yeah.
Okay? Look, I get it. But you know what? It's part of the job description. It's part of the job description to be a leader, and it's part of the job description to answer the questions, and it's part of the job description to kind of take the blame when things happen.
You're right.
And so, yes, this is all kind of a cockamamie process that happens and really stinks for these guys, but would you be pissed off if you were the boss of a company and something happened and your employee showed his raw emotion, boom, right out there? Of course you would. Part of your job is to kind of just sit there and take it all in and just be respectful about it and not show your emotions in a negative way.
See,
Yes, I get it. These guys are like glorified gladiators. They really are, if you think about it. They're like glorified gladiators. You just give them a sword. But to a certain extent, you have to just do it.
You're right.
You
And
have
it's
to
part
do
of
it.
his job,
You
and
have to do
I
it.
agree that Peyton wouldn't have acted that way. I agree that Tom Brady wouldn't have acted that way. Russell Wilson wouldn't have acted that
No
way.
way.
Eli Manning wouldn't have acted that way. But I'm also of the weird kind of group in the media that I feel like if I like when people are candid. I like when you see a great response to a person. I like when you see the raw emotion and the actual natural feel, not giving you some robotic cliche answers.
And that's what makes Cam Cam. That's what makes Newton,
and that's why I'm fine with that, because he's showing you who he is, and he's showing
Right.
that I came off that field and I'm really pissed off and I'm really upset that we lost and I really don't want to talk about it. And that to me says a whole heck of a lot more than if he came off that field and was out there smiling, going, "Yeah, we just kind of screwed up, and we'll get him next year." That shows to me that guy has no leadership skills. He's not a real leader if that guy's not upset. He's not a real leader if he's up there smiling and fielding questions, in a proper manner, because it's showing this game did not really factor in his brain at all. It did not matter to him. So the people who said he did not jump on the fumble because he was giving up on his teammates, to me, the press conference says the complete opposite, because it shows that he cared about winning that game so much that he could not stomach to answer a question from an idiot reporter.
What about this? What if he sat down, started fielding these questions that were just probably asinine,
Yeah, they were.
and say, "Look, you know what? We just lost the biggest game of my life. I really don't want to do this right now. I'm sorry. See you later." I think I would respect that more. Because you know
He'd
what?
still
That's
get
the
flack
best
for it,
it's
because
but it's the best of both worlds.
But he's still not the 3-minute mark that he has to hit. So if he did that, it would have been a whole story as well. He sat there for the 3 minutes. He didn't give much. He pulled the whole Marshawn Lynch kind of thing, who retired. But
Side note.
Yeah, side note. But so I think either way he would have been. He's gonna be criticized no matter what he does now, because he's now the new face, and people hate him. You have the old white fans who still hate him because he puts his forehead in his elbow crease, like I said a couple weeks back. People are gonna hate him for that. So I don't have a problem with the guy showing me how he really feels, how he genuinely feels when he comes off that field. I hate when athletes give you they toe the company line. They don't want to say anything that's going to put him in harm's way or give a real strong opinion. He's giving you his natural raw reaction. I respect that. And I love players who are always candid in interviews or, on a press conference or whatever they're doing. I want to see the real person. I want to see the real Cam Newton. And we saw the real Cam Newton, a guy who did care about that game, a guy who understood the magnitude of him losing that game. And he showed us in that 3 minutes and 15-second press conference, or, half-assed press conference he gave. So I think people need to stop, because what do they really expect him to say? And if you put yourself in your shoes, you're not going to want to answer any of those questions. It's just a fact. I would not answer any of those questions. I wouldn't even shown up to the damn press conference to sit up there and say, what went wrong? I don't know. I sucked. The defense was better than me. Like, I did not make a play. That's like, what else are you supposed to say out there?
No,
It's
you're right.
the whole process. The process
you're
is
right.
screwy.
It is.
It has to change.
But you know what? I wanna deviate this conversation just a quick
Yeah, we
little.
can
I want to
wrap
make a
this
quick right turn here and say what really pissed me off about the whole thing. Now that we're gonna get into, I guess, the Lynch retirement, was the Lynch announcement during the whole game and during all of that.
I think it's the smartest thing. It's just typical Marshawn Lynch, having a tweet, like a subliminal kind of message tweet during the Super Bowl when no one's going to really pay attention to it, and kind of go out in the sunset his own way. I think is quintessential to Marshawn Lynch.
It is, but it got me so riled up for about 5 minutes, which is why I don't want to spend that much time on it.
No, we don't have to.
But it got me just so riled up for 5 minutes where I was just like, you could have done that a lot better.
Yeah.
You could have done that way better.
Well, I think for him it's the perfect way. He's not the same as the other guys in the NFL, and I think his tweet it's never been done before. Throwing his own cleats up on like a telephone cable it's just hilarious. And I used to be bothered by him for the whole not wanting to do interviews and stuff, but then again I realized that's who he is, and he's showing us who he is. So in a way of him not doing his interviews kind of gives you a little insight of his personality. And he's just very anti-media, but he's apparently a very good guy. He's very charitable, and is really funny. I've heard and read stuff. He's very funny and very personable when you're with him in person, just not being interviewed. So that's just who he is. He's very anti-media, and I think we learn a lot from him, from his actions, the way he does things. Him posting a picture like that's kind of ambiguous during the Super Bowl is hilarious, and it's very Marshawn Lynch. So I have no problem with it. I think it adds to his character.
It does, but it gets to me. It still gets to me. I don't know. I'm all about doing things the right way.
Also said he's 29 years old and retiring.
He's
the best scorer of touchdowns at the running back position since I think 2011, 2012.
This is more indicative of, I believe, the trend that we are going to continue to see in the NFL.
Very
in terms
short
of
careers.
Injuries,
Calvin Johnson.
Calvin Johnson, Marshawn Lynch.
We saw Patrick Willis last year. Yeah.
Sure. This is, and Borland too. Chris Borland, boom.
Yeah. Those are some of the best players in the league.
Chris Borland had an excellent rookie season.
You could argue Patrick Willis was the best linebacker when he retired. You could argue that Calvin Johnson, he was the best receiver in the NFL and was still in the top group. And Marshawn Lynch, again, the same thing, in the top group of running backs. We lost 3 of their best players in the NFL, all way before they should have retired.
Way more coming. Yeah. Way more definitely coming.
It will be.
But transition us there, brother.
Yeah, so we kind of wrapped up the Cam talk here. The one last thing I wanted to get to, and it kind of leads into, will the Panthers be back next year, was the odds. And I would love to bring it up on my computer, but I'm afraid to.
I have it on mine here.
So I know that the Patriots, some teams are tied at 8-1 odds.
We have Seattle, New England, and Pittsburgh at 8-1.
So Seattle, New England, and Pittsburgh are 8-1 odds to win Super Bowl 51 next year.
Then Green Bay, Arizona, Carolina are tied at 10-1.
Yeah, I have a problem with that.
Why?
I have a big problem with that.
I love this. This is great.
Why? How could you convince me that the New England Patriots and who was it, the Pittsburgh Steelers
and Seattle?
I don't know how you can convince me that they're that much better than the Panthers. Like, why the Panthers? I think should be the easy favorite,
like the 2-1 favorite.
No, like a 5-6-1 to win next year.
Okay.
Because I think you saw what Cam did this year. And I don't think it'll stop anytime soon. How could you tell me that the Patriots are the favorite to win it all when they could not beat Peyton Manning this year with whatever arm he had left, a mangled arm, neck he had left, and you have a team that was full of holes. They have so many holes, that team, and Tom Brady's not getting any younger. So you have you were exposed. We saw how many holes that team had, and yes, this is 100% my Patriot bias coming out, but I could rip into the other teams too.
You have Patriot bias? You
saw the holes they had on the offensive defensive line. They had no way of stopping the Broncos pass rush. The offensive line is atrocious. When they lose Edelman or they lose Gronk, they have no other options on offense. They don't have a single running back you can rely on. They don't have a receiver. You could say what you want about Danny Amendola. He's a poor man's version of Edelman. So, Danny Amendola, when he was there alone, wasn't making the team any better. So when you lose one of those guys, your team is shot. That's not a Super Bowl winning team. A Super Bowl winning team is, if you lose a guy, it's next man up. And you fill that role and you do your job and you win.
You know what, though? The New England Patriots kind of embody the next man up thing.
But they didn't, because they didn't win. They didn't win.
I'm just saying, normally they do. Normally they definitely do.
They had a close game versus the Chiefs, and they had a terrible stretch at the end of the regular season. They
also
lost
had
the Jets,
guys
they lost
missing.
the Dolphins.
Gronk was out. Edelman was out.
That's my point. If you lose those guys like they did down the stretch of the regular season, they were terrible.
So I think what they're saying is that with a fully loaded roster,
it's the same crap that you have Brady and Belichick, and you automatically have to put them in the top of the league.
Sure, of course
I'm sick
you
of
do.
that whole rhetoric and narrative. I'm sick.
But you know what? The only way to get rid of it is to beat them. So until
they were beat,
sure, but multiple times. They
lost to teams in their own division. They lost to the Broncos, and I don't think they would have beat the Panthers. I think
I'm
Panthers
with you,
lost
but
because
don't
of
the
pass
Panthers
rush.
have guys that could be leaving? Couldn't they lose Josh Norman?
Like I said last week, yeah, he's a free agent. But like I said last week, Cam is one of those guys who, I guess besides this past game, could really lead a team by himself and do what him doing what he does in the field could lead to wins. His wins above replacement for the NFL, if they had that, would be very high. He'd be the highest in the league because he is the closest thing to being a one-man team, even though I think they have a pretty good core around them. They're going to get Kelvin Benjamin back.
Sure, that was the point I was going to make.
Their defense is their best defensive players, if they keep Norman, are pretty young. If Thomas Davis, comes back from the form, he played already. If he heals that thing up, he's fine. Kuechly's great. They have guys like Kawan Short. They have what's his name? The defensive tackle with the funny
Star,
yeah, right. And they have these young guys who are studs, so they're not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think them not being the clear favorite is wrong. The Seahawks, I could say, are going to be always in the mix because the Seahawks have Russell Wilson, who, if you have a young quarterback who's won already, you're always going to be in the mix. It's as simple as that. That's why the Packers there with Aaron Rodgers. the Packers have a ton of holes. You're talking about
The
holes.
Packers have holes like
Ton of holes.
like Swiss cheese.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of these picks are based on their past success and their quarterback. I'm not against the Steelers being around the top.
Neither
I
am I.
also agree with I think the Cardinals should be around there as
Near
well.
the top, yeah.
So I mean, the only thing I would just put the Panthers at the favorite, and I'd put the Steelers and the Cardinals close to them, as well as the Seahawks, and I'd move the Packers and the Patriots back a little bit. The Broncos, I think, also should be kind of in the mix as well, considering they are the champions, and I don't think they're going to lose that much, steam really with Brock Osweiler. What's better to learn than under Peyton Manning? Like
Learning under same thing as you could say about Rodgers learning under Favre.
Right.
It's the same sort of thing, and all of these things are just indicative of you have top end quarterbacks that could or should win MVPs or have won MVPs and have won Super Bowls.
I'll say this about the odds as well.
It.
We're also it's very early on, and think the odds will change again right before the season starts. I guess
Of course
after
they will.
free agency
Sure.
draft, we'll see what happens there. I mean, big injuries could happen.
They might
You
change
never
if
know.
Sean McCoy gets jail time.
Also very.
You know
true.
what I mean?
So that's pretty much all the NFL stuff. That's our last probably NFL
Well,
X's and O's wrap up ever. So wow,
I just want to
it's
say
been-
one quick thing. If you're
Sure.
a betting man, bet Cleveland 200-1. So if you're a betting man, bet
Put
Cleveland.
$1 down, man. So it's sad to see the NFL season go. But we will have more NFL subjects with the whole draft and free agency period coming up. But in terms of games, that's it. It's going to be a really rough month now. Just strictly NHL and NBA, and luckily there are a lot of things to talk about in those two sports, and we spent a full hour basically already on the NFL. There was a quick trade. I know you have the details quick. We'll mention that before we get to the NBA stuff. But Dion Phaneuf, the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, their defenseman, was traded to the Ottawa Senators. Now we'll be playing with Erik Karlsson. It was a big
I have
9-player trade, I believe.
I have the details.
I have a couple of texts about that.
Where is it? How did I not have this? Anyway, basically, they get a whole bunch of players, and Toronto gets a whole bunch of players, and the two key pieces on either side is one is a second-round pick going to Toronto, and the Sens get Dion. So that's really
there's
it.
no other big star name, and it's a lot of prospects.
No, it's
just retooling of the franchises.
Here we go.
Farm system.
Announced today that the club has acquired defenseman Dion Phaneuf, forward Matt Fratton, forward Casey
Okay.
Bailey, and Ryan Rupert, defense prospect Cody Donaghy from the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for defenseman Jared Cohen. Cohen's a decent name.
Mhm.
Colin Greening, Milan Michalek, Tobias Lindbergh, as well as Ottawa's second-round pick in 2017.
So a couple of guys, and then you had Greening, Mahalik, and Fratton as well as on the Maple Leafs. So that's basically what the two teams who are kind of mediocre and are just struggling, kind of retool the whole farm and younger players and try to just see if some of this package works and builds a decent core, especially for the Maple Leafs. They've been struggling for quite some time. The NHL trading deadline is coming up soon. I know lately the Rangers have been on a pretty good streak, a good win versus the Devils, a couple comeback wins versus the Flyers and the Wild, so they've been playing pretty well. And we'll dive deeper into the whole NHL trading deadline season and a kind of a mid-season recap soon. But right now the NBA, is dominating with a lot of news. My New York Knicks fired Derek Fisher yesterday morning while I was at work. I could tell you that was a very, very busy day.
I can tell you that I got to watch Derek Fisher's last game as coach of the New York Knicks.
You did. You know who was at the game, right?
Who?
Phil Jackson.
Yeah, he was.
And he doesn't come to a lot of the games. So when he does, something's up. And I think they wanted to see how they reacted past that. Just quick reasons why I think maybe he was fired. People love to point out the whole Matt Barnes thing, and I'm not saying that was the cause, but I think that might have had a lot to do with it. In terms of, I think Matt Barnes and the other comments he's made, the whole, everything he says, it gets taken negatively because he was never liked in New York. That's just a fact. I'm speaking on behalf of the fans and what I read and watch and listen to. Derek Fisher never had the vote of confidence of the city. Derek Fisher never had the likeness of the fan base. Derek Fisher was never the first choice to be the head coach of the Knicks when he was hired, a year and a half ago. So seeing him always in the tabloids in terms of whether the Matt Barnes situation, or it's him saying we don't run plays, or it's him saying we don't care about the playoffs, or it's him getting into a war of words with Rajon Rondo about not being good in the triangle and Fisher firing back. I mean, Fisher said he's not good in the triangle after Rondo said he wouldn't be a good fit there and what have you. Stuff like that. When you say things you don't have to say, and I know some coaches get the benefit of the doubt, and he never did. And I think it's probably the best case scenario they moved on from him because I never thought he'd be a great coach. I don't like it they did it mid-season because earlier on, everyone was saying, well, the Knicks look great, Knicks to make the playoffs. It's a fun team to watch again, and now they kind of, streaked in the wrong way, and we're at the point where we are now where they're in, the 10th, 11th seed, and they're struggling mightily, and in the back of everyone's mind, too, is the whole, are you going to trade Melo rumors, the Melo for Blake thing, which we can talk about a little bit. So it's a situation where Phil fired him. He said it was his decision. You're going to move on from him. Kurt Rambis is now the interim head coach. And then the whole pool of coaches who are available. Obviously, there's the Tom Thibodeau one, which everyone seems to have as their number one option. I would love that. You have Luke Walton, who's the Golden State Warriors assistant, the star assistant, who led them to an unbelievable record while he was filling in for Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr, who also interviewed for the New York Knicks job. And then I guess Brian Shaw is a Phil Jackson guy, a triangle guy, and that's what this job will be about. Is it going to be a Phil guy, a triangle guy, or they're going to say, you know what, maybe we'll just say let bygones be bygones with Tom Thibodeau, who was a Jeff Van Gundy guy who Dolan despised, and we'll bring him back in because we saw what he did with the Bulls. We saw how he's respected by everyone, and he's a smart coach, and he has talented players. So it's an interesting kind of time for Knicks fans because you don't have a real head coach. You're still trying to find your guy. You don't have a pick in this draft, but you have a superstar in waiting in Kristaps Porzingis, and you still have a guy, Melo, who you could argue is playing some of the best ball of his career. He might not be scoring like he used to because he's not taking 35 shots a game, but he's passing like he can. He's rebounding like he always has. So he's playing pretty good basketball, and it's going to be interesting to see if they trade him right now or they hold him on, for the remainder of his contract, or they trade him in the offseason. And the other good part is that with the salary cap rising and the Knicks making a lot of room, they will be a player for certain guys. And Woj reported, not D'Angelo Russell Westbrook could be in the mix for the Knicks when he's a free agent. They always are linked to Kevin Durant as well if he wants to come to New York. I don't really see either happening, but the fact that Woj is reporting it could be something interesting. Woj also said that Durant might be going to Golden State, so that would just make the whole league not really worthwhile anymore if he goes there because no one will win. But so I'm throwing a lot of information at you right now, a lot of stuff dealing with why he was fired, the replacements, the offseason for the Knicks, do they trade Melo? There's a lot of different ways to tackle this, so I don't know where you want to start.
Let me go in chronological order.
Let
Let me digest a little bit of what you said. First of all, I think Derek Fisher's a bad head coach. That's the first. I've been to 2 Knicks games this whole year. One was on Friday and one was on Sunday, and both of them, Fisher coached poorly.
Yeah.
Okay, so call it what you want. He coached poorly. Now, whatever you want to say, this team's not that great. They're not really in contention anyway. 40-96 speaks for itself. Okay, so that's the second thing. 40-96 is disgusting.
They had an all-time terrible team record last year, but last year not talented. But I don't.
Doesn't matter.
This year you had players, and you still started to screw up later on. And that's what it comes down to. On top of the other crap you've done off the court. That's when you put it in its entirety. That's what happens. And I think his final grade as a coach would be no better than like a C- or a D because of all the idiotic stuff he did.
The idiotic things were, how about this on Sunday? There are 3 things that happened that game that you could totally blame the coach for. 1, slow start. Okay? Yeah. You blame the coach for that. 2, your best players were not aggressive enough. And as a coach, you need to get more out of your best players. Second thing. Third thing is they come all the way back. Porzingis leads them all the way back, hitting threes, bang shots, looking like Tim Duncan. Okay? They're up by 2 at the end of the third quarter. Fourth quarter comes in, they go back down by 8. You know what that is? That's entirely the coach's fault.
Yeah.
They come in the third, hot like a forest fire. You come out and throw a different 5 out there on the court that ended the third quarter. It makes no sense to me at all. I turned to the radio guys because my cousin's season tickets right over. I turned to the radio guys who just put my hands up, and they same thing. Same reaction.
That's been a big.
It makes no sense.
His lineup changes has been a huge problem.
Are just asinine.
Huge problem.
And he doesn't play Porzingis nearly enough
Not in
quality
time.
minutes. Yeah. Nearly enough. The kid's the second best player, maybe the best player, obviously, when Melo's off the court on this team. I just don't understand. The guy's a double-double machine, and he doesn't get crunch time minutes. He can stretch the floor as a 4-man. He passes a little bit. He mixes it up with rebounds. Reward the kid. And if you're going to lose and go on 7 or 8 game losing streaks, then lose with the kid in the lineup at least. For him able to make a difference.
Right.
I just don't really get it. So that's the big picture there in terms of him as a coach. And I'm a Laker guy. I love the Lakers. I love Phil. I think the Laker organization owes Phil and Derek a lot.
Sure.
But this has been a disaster from day one.
Yeah, and you said a lot of great points, and I totally
total
agree.
disaster from day
His
one.
lineups are ridiculous, and the fact that you're not playing Porzingis, who, like you said, either first or second best player on your team, depending on certain nights, a guy who's 7'3" could basically do it all. Why you're not having him in the minutes, in the crunch time minutes, in minutes where you could win the game, before the game is decided? You don't have him in there. You're taking out a huge aspect of your team, of your offense. It's gone. Then, in terms of his, look, they don't have a pick. So him saying the playoffs aren't really an option, they don't care about the playoffs.
That's your only option, actually.
That's a huge problem. It is. And it's their only option because what is everyone talking about with the Knicks in an upcoming offseason? It's about luring free agents here to play. They're not going to want to come to teams who aren't competitive. Yes, it's New York, but the whole New York thing didn't work last year. Guys like Greg Monroe said, see you later, I'm going to go to friggin' Milwaukee.
Who now wants to trade him, by the way.
But it still shows that people don't... LaMarcus Aldridge saying that Aldridge did not want to go to L.A. He went to San Antonio because he wants to win. Players want to win now. They want to team up with their buddies and they want to win. New York is fine because you can get multiple players and you'll have Porzingis, you'll have Melo there potentially. But when you're not winning games, it makes it look like, well, I'm going to just switch teams, get a boatload of money, and just stay here in the cellar dwellers for forever. So you want to win and you want to have your players be competitive and you want to have that playoff atmosphere feel. When you bring in guys like a Flalo and Robin Lopez and Derek Williams who's having a pretty good year, and you have Lance Thomas who's going to get paid, and you have Langston Galloway who's going to get paid, all having great years, much better than they were last year, and then you add in Porzingis, who was the phenom, and you have Melo who's playing much better, that's not a bad group, and the fact that he's coaching so poorly...
There's no excuse for 8 games under 500 with that roster.
And you're right, they're starting off slow, they're getting themselves out of games, and they somehow will themselves right back in,
for him
and they
to
just
blow
it
again
at the
right.
end. So it's his coaching style, and I said it's not, if it was purely because of his coaching and how they performed, I think you could say last year was a lost cause. Last year the team was not good. It was a bunch of D-League players.
Right.
And then this year you had stretches where they were good and stretches where they were bad. You still have a half a season. The All-Star game hasn't hit yet. You still have a half a season left. You could still turn things around. You're not totally out of the playoff picture yet. But when you add it in with the whole distraction he's caused from his comments and from the fight with Matt Barnes, when you're leaving your team practice to go there, it's a bad look for the franchise. It puts a stain on the franchise because your coach is basically acting immature.
You know what's funny is that for as quiet and for as much of a good leader, he was the head of the NBAPA.
Yes.
So for as good of a leader as he was and as quiet as I thought he was watching him for 15 years in LA, he has come so far in an opposite direction in regards to this Matt Barnes garbage, okay? To the fact where the Garden was chanting Gloria all game on Sunday.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's garbage. And the players hear it. Matt Barnes hears it. Everyone hears it.
Right.
And how does Fisher must feel when he sits there and hears it? Like, oh, this really sucks. Well, it's your fault.
It is. 100%
it's your
his fault.
And you know what?
His fault.
That and then the comments to Rondo. Granted, Rondo is his own other animal, but shut up and coach your team that sucks right now.
Don't poke the bear.
Shut up and coach your team that sucks.
Right.
You're the reason why it sucks. It's not Melo's fault.
No.
I watched Melo play defense.
Yeah.
It's like I was like he's
like playing some of the best ball of his
same way
career.
I felt with the halftime show at the Super Bowl. I was like, huh? So I watched Melo play defense. I love that kid Porzingis.
Yeah.
I love the kid Porzingis. I don't even root for the Knicks. I love Porzingis. Derek Williams, all those guys have been great, and yet you're still 8 games under. How?
Phil did a great job. Phil brought in the guys, and they're all clicking. They're all working. People didn't like the Robin Lopez contract. Well, you know what? He's playing great.
Rolo's
People
excellent.
didn't like the Follow contract. And if he didn't miss time, this team's record could have been much better. And he's been sometimes the best option for the Knicks on certain nights. He's taken over games before. So all the contracts worked out. They hit on Porzingis, the guy that no one wanted. Everyone wanted the first pick. They wanted the Towns, Okafor, Russell. They wait until 4, and you potentially get the best of the bunch. And you're taking this whole team over by storm. And like you said, Melo's playing defense. Melo's passing the ball. He's playing smart. The team seems ready, and the one part that's not ready is the coach and the coaching aspect. And I think coaching matters. I think having a guy like Thibodeau, a hard-nosed guy who makes the most out of players. Look what he did with the Bulls team. Those were like backup role players, guys like Nate Robinson and Brooks and
Taj Gibson.
Yes, he's making the most out of guys who are mediocre at best. DJ Augustine, he made him a player. All these guys he brings in, he's doing a good job with them. And I think you have a guy like Thibodeau in here. If somehow James Dolan could stay out of the whole basketball decisions and let Phil do what he wants, because people crapped on Phil last year. Right now, Phil, the way he created this team, how he has them going forward, is in a pretty good spot. And yes, the whole Bargnani trade was a joke because now you lost their pick, but you're still in shape to go get a big-time free agent or two, and you have the guys in a good core right now, which is fine.
I think that in terms of coaching, I think Thibodeau makes the most sense. And let's
it
just
makes the most sense for the fan base. It does not make the most sense if you're Phil Jackson or James Dolan.
Of
because
course
one,
not.
James Dolan hates him, and two, Phil Jackson's a triangle guy. He's going to want a triangle coach like Luke Walton or like Brian Shaw.
But here's the thing. Is that, first of all, James Dolan is a moron.
Yeah, he is.
He's a
Everyone knows
moron.
that. He's the worst owner in sports. Everyone knows that. I totally agree. There's nothing more to be said about it.
But I think that Thibodeau is a guy who's been there and done that. Sure, Luke Walton coached a team, but look, Ed, me and you know pretty much zilch about like X's and O's.
He can coach that team.
Okay, we could coach the Warriors and probably win a game or two.
I think Walton's going to get it. I think he might go to L.A.
Of course he's going to get an NBA job. I mean, the guy's
I think
30 years old.
I think he might go to the Lakers or might go to a different job. I don't see him being a New York guy.
Not a Knick guy.
I don't think
he
he
might
is.
be with Phil, but I don't think Phil and Walton in New York is going to work. Brian Shaw, sure, but like, has Brian Shaw been there and done that before? Like,
No.
what does Brian?
He was a coach. He coached the Nuggets and he failed.
Right. You don't want a failed experiment again. You want a guy who's
If the Knicks-
established, who's respected, who gets a team to play defense, because we sure as hell know that the best teams in the league right now are number 1 and 2 in defensive efficiency,
Right.
in the Warriors and the Spurs.
Dropping
And
stats.
so defense works, okay?
What would happen if the Knicks hired Brian Shaw? Like, what would happen in the city of New
The
York?
fan base would probably collectively take a bazooka out and launch it at the first thing they see
Yeah.
in regards to James Dolan
Yeah.
and Phil Jackson.
Yeah. They would burn down the Madison Square Garden. 34th, 35th, 36th, 37th Street, whatever. 7th Avenue.
The garden,
The whole
is,
area
the garden is burning.
would just be a war zone because if they hire Brian Shaw, you go and get a guy, Derek Fisher, who wasn't, didn't have experience. He tried to pull the whole Jason Kidd of going from player to coach and
Speaking
didn't really
of bad
work
coaches.
out. And it didn't work. You didn't get a guy with experience. You have Tom Thibodeau saying, from sources saying, that he would crawl back to Madison Square Garden to coach that team.
Who wouldn't, though?
Why
Who wouldn't?
Why do you think he was waiting out for so long? He could have gotten a job last year. He could have given multiple jobs. People were fired this year. He could have gotten jobs. So it bothers me that I think right now, especially with all the different names that are coming out, they don't have a guy in mind.
Kevin Ollie is released too, by the way. Not that he may leave UConn, but
Yeah.
Kevin Ollie's a name that's been discussed as well.
They don't have a guy. They don't have a target because they had a target. They'd go after him already. There's so many names floating out there because they don't know what to do. Because I think internally they're saying Shaw's not the guy. Shaw didn't prove anything, and fans would go crazy. And I think the fan base, the reaction, you generally want a good reaction from your fans and from the media attention because I don't think people would really clap their hands at them hiring Brian Shaw. I think Luke Walton right now would be be impossible almost to pry him away from that team.
It's also a very risky thing.
Yeah, and then you have like Thibodeau, who makes the most sense because one, he's sitting home on his couch, and two, it's just they're struggling with that because if you bring him back, it's Dolan basically going back on his past feelings. So they're in a really rough spot. They don't have a single guy to go out and pick, and they're in a really rough spot right now. I think the quicker you make a decision and you go forward and try to build up the success you had at some parts of the season is the best possible scenario because you want to win as much as possible so you can go after guys like Westbrook and you can go after guys like Durant.
That's a great point. I think that's a really great point because you put yourself in Russell Westbrook's shoes, right? You have a great thing going right now in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
If you're even thinking about leaving, you're going to leave to a team that has something going on. And as much as you could have something going on with your roster, if your coach sucks, then it tarnishes everything almost. Yeah. And how much better of a look is it for your, Westbrook, Durant, whoever, a big-time free agent to say, wow, that team's got Melo, it's got Porzingis, got a couple of role guys that could really play,
And you're coached by Tom Thibodeau.
Boom. That's just like, boom, you put that's like the stamp of approval on everything, having an excellent head coach. And so I look at, if I'm Russell Westbrook, I look at Brian Shaw, I look at Luke Walton, less so, but I look at Kevin Ollie and I go,
Right. Right.
What do I want with this team?
Right. I have
When
Billy Donovan right now, and I'm playing with another top 5 player in the NBA, possibly number 2 or 3, with Kevin Durant.
What do I want? Why do I want to leave for that?
And these reports are coming out for a reason. Like, I believe that with the whole Durant to Golden State thing, or even, not even just Golden State, if Durant leaves,
That's a wild rumor.
if he goes to Washington, if he goes to wherever he wants to go, I think the reason why there's reports that the Knicks could be interested. I mean, Westbrook could be interested in New York is because they're both, I think, separately looking. They're getting ready to leave Oklahoma City. They know they're probably not going to win this year. They're not going to beat the Spurs or the Warriors. Why stay in a small market like Oklahoma City, a team that didn't want to pay, for James Harden to keep James Harden? So I think Russell was, who's an LA guy, might be looking at LA, but they're in a mess right now too, and their roster doesn't have really the same attractiveness that the Knicks have.
And if they get Ben Simmons, they're going to have to make a serious decision about him or D'Angelo Russell. Yeah, so that's going to be a whole other fiasco.
And that's even if they get him. And right now, Byron Scott's being destroyed by everyone in the league right now, players and media, and so no one really respects him anymore. So maybe he's thinking, well, I wanted to go to LA, but that doesn't seem like a great option. What's the next best thing? I'm a big fashion guy. I could play with Melo. I could play with Porzingis. So these thoughts might be creeping into his mind. So when you don't have a coach and you're losing games, that's just doing the whole opposite effect. Same thing goes for Durant. Durant, has been linked to New York, to Brooklyn, to Washington, his hometown. So when you have these guys who are kind of separately on their own, they're going, okay, I might start putting the feelers out and go to other places. It matters of how you present yourself, your team, to these guys, these huge stars who are going to be on the market on a year that you'll have cap space. So it's very interesting to be the Knicks right now, because you have to make the right moves to set yourself up for success in the offseason.
I think the right move is just don't be stubborn. Just don't be stubborn.
Right.
Just be open to everything, because I think he's still your best option, and you may hate him, and you may not get along with his. What it
comes down to is James Dolan. You have nothing to do with basketball. You're the owner of the team. Stay out of it. And I know he won't. Yeah, but if Phil Jackson,
do what you do with the
if
Rangers.
Phil Jackson could be okay with hiring Tom Thibodeau, and the players want him, and the fan base will love it, then you should just shut your mouth and just go focus on your music and just leave the basketball to Phil Jackson, because in my opinion, he's done a good job.
I think Phil's been great. I think Phil's really been great. I mean, you're not building. Look, you got to know you're not going to make the play. You're not going to get a pick, and you need to know that you're not going to win the entire thing right now, because Golden State Warriors are just like nothing. I mean,
not even the Golden State Warriors. They wouldn't even make it out of the East.
In the East, whatever. You're not going to beat LeBron. You have to understand that. So, in terms of timing your ascent with LeBron's decline, that's kind of what Phil needs to be worried about, and to make yourself competitive in the meantime. Right. And I think he's done a really good job for how handcuffed he's kind of been. Sure. So he deserves all the praise, and I think that this Fisher firing was a long, long time coming already.
Yeah.
So,
and you could argue it might not have been a great time for the Knicks to do this right now, but
it was. Bad. I mean, you got one game and then the All-Star. You got one game and then the All-Star break. So
I'm just saying doing it mid-season as opposed to doing it in the off-season. But I agree. I mean, it was a long time coming, a lot because of his comments and off-the-court kind of stuff.
And if you have any kind of prayer of wanting to make the playoffs this year, you can still do it. You said they're not out of it.
No, they're not.
And they're not. What are they, 5.5 back, 4.5 back?
From the East, but around that,
you can do it.
Sure.
You just need the right guy at the helm.
And it matters to set yourself up for the offseason. And I'm not a big speculation guy on these rumors. I'm not going to start saying, if Woj said that Russell Westbrook might be interested in the Knicks, he's definitely coming to the Knicks. It does not mean that to me. Same thing goes for Durant. I don't want to get into old Durant to Golden State. I'm not going to speculate on that. That's going to, it's not happening right now. I could talk about how it affects the teams right now and how it affects them as you want to look your best for them. So if Phil Jackson doesn't go to LA like the rumors say, and he wants to stay here and finish the job to attract those guys, you have to make the right decision that makes the fans happy and makes the most sense for your team, not just what James Dolan says.
That's where Phil's going to get really judged, in my opinion, whether or not he sees this through. If you don't see this through, then I have a real problem with his tenure in New York.
It's not really even 75% completing it. You might be around you got your pick. You got the one pick, you nailed it. You nailed the pick. You signed a couple guys to the lower level guys to contracts, and I think you nailed all those too. So now the big stuff is, what do you do with Melo? What do you do with the next coach? And what do you do with the big time, the big
big
prizes?
fish.
Yeah,
The big fish.
in,
Yep.
in the offseason. What do you do with those guys? That's the next step for him. So he's not even close to being done yet, and that's what we have to wait and see.
And it remains to be seen, exactly like
Yeah.
you said.
What else we wanted to get to today?
That's
Bean
it,
pot?
man. I think we did pretty good. That's a
Bean-
lot. That's a lot of stuff on 2 topics. That's pretty good.
Hour 15, 2
Yeah,
topics.
that's pretty good.
We said we mentioned the Bean Pot. BU lost in overtime
It's all right, boys.
to BC.
How about Sean McGuire? Played a hell of a
He's
tournament, huh?
MVP, 41 saves, I think, before the gave up the goal. So, I mean, great job on him. It stinks to lose to BC. BC still sucks. But, yeah, anyway, next week, like I was saying before, probably more NHL stuff. Definitely more NHL and NBA heavy because the NFL is gone, unfortunately.
Maybe we can pull one of our BU guys and come and hang out with us
Yeah,
a little bit.
we're trying to get a couple guests in the works. Also, probably maybe more MLB hot stove kind of stuff because pitchers and catchers are reporting very soon.
Oh,
So
isn't
that's
that a
always
glorious
good.
thing?
As always, though, follow us on Twitter. It's at DNS_podcast. Follow Nick at @N_pick, PICHT, and myself at Edward L. Murphy on Twitter. You could go on SoundCloud and listen to us there. You could also download and subscribe and then listen to us on iTunes. That'll be up very shortly as well. The YouTube is now working. If you somehow want to watch/listen to us on YouTube, you can find our page. Just type in Dishing and Swishing Podcast, and all the episodes will be there as well as our site. If you're just browsing the site, reading old stories that we wrote during the summer and stuff, or want to go back to the archives, to the old episodes, dishingandswishing.com has all our latest podcast there as well. I'm pretty sure that's all the plugs we need to make. Thanks to all those who tweeted us. Don't forget to like the Facebook fan page as well, Dishing and Swishing Podcast on Facebook. You can comment questions, tweet us questions as well. We'll answer all those. Didn't really get any this week, but we had a lot of stuff to talk about anyway, so that's fine.
This stuff is so much fun when I just get to watch you
try to
just
remember
like
and say
make
as
every
quickly as
plug.
possible. Yeah, we're trying. Any last words before we wrap this up?
Nah, that's it. I'm just a little upset BU wasn't able to finish that job yesterday, man. That was a tough game. They fought hard, but they'll be back. They'll win. Just got to focus on winning the real hardware. And then we got pitchers and catchers coming up in a week or so that should be fun. I'm really looking forward to that. And then our Ranger boys got a real big game on Wednesday
I'm
night.
looking for the Rangers too, and I'm looking forward to see how the Dishing and Swishing